I stared at my phone screen, my hands trembling as I looked at my sister Caroline's Christmas Instagram post. Luxury-wrapped presents scattered around a massive tree, designer toys worth thousands of dollars, a professional photographer capturing her twins opening gifts that cost more than most people's monthly rent. My 7-year-old daughter Emma tugged at my sleeve, pointing at the glowing screen with confused, innocent eyes. "Daddy, why did Grandma and Grandpa buy Jake and Sophie all those presents but said they couldn't afford my birthday gift last week?" My stomach dropped like a stone as the devastating truth about my family's deliberate favoritism hit me with the force of a sledgehammer, and I realized I'd been blind to their cruelty for years. 3 weeks earlier, I was sitting in my auto repair shop office in suburban Columbus, Ohio, planning the perfect 7th birthday party for Emma. I had reserved the community center, ordered a custom princess cake, and invited 20 kids from her school. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, Patricia, that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. "Honey, money's really tight this month with Dad's medical bills. We won't be able to get Emma anything for her birthday. Hope you understand." I immediately called her back, my heart filled with concern for my parents who had always seemed financially stable. "Mom, what's going on with Dad? Is he okay? Do you need help with the medical expenses?" Patricia's voice sounded strained and rushed. "Oh, Isaac, you're such a good son. Dad's having some procedures done, and the insurance isn't covering everything. We just can't manage any extra expenses right now." Without hesitation, I offered to send them money to help with whatever they needed. I had built my auto shop from nothing, working 16-hour days for 10 years, and business was finally thriving. If my parents were struggling, I wanted to help. "That's sweet of you, but we'll manage," Patricia replied quickly. "Just explain to Emma that Grandma and Grandpa love her very much, but we can't make it to her party." After hanging up, I shared the conversation with my wife Sarah as she folded tiny pink party dresses for Emma's celebration. Sarah paused, her expression thoughtful. "Isaac, has your mom ever mentioned your dad having health problems before?" I shook my head. "Not really, but you know how private they are about personal stuff." Sarah nodded but looked troubled. "It just seems sudden, that's all." The next day, Emma's birthday party was a magical success, despite my parents' absence. 20 giggling 7-year-olds ran around the decorated community center, while Emma beamed in her sparkly tiara. But throughout the afternoon, Emma kept asking where Grandma and Grandpa were. Each time my chest tightened as I repeated the explanation about Grandpa's medical situation. "But Daddy," Emma said while blowing out her 7 candles, "Grandma and Grandpa never miss Jake and Sophie's birthdays. I saw all their pictures on Aunt Carolyn's phone last time." Sarah and I exchanged glances. Emma was right. My sister Caroline always posted elaborate celebrations where our parents appeared front and center, beaming with pride as they presented expensive gifts to their grandchildren. That evening, after Emma was asleep, I called my parents to check on Dad's condition and let them know how much Emma missed them. Patricia answered on the first ring, but her voice had a different quality than that morning. "Oh, Isaac, the party was today, wasn't it? How did it go?" Something felt off about her tone. In the background, I could hear my sister Caroline's distinctive laugh and what sounded like children playing. I decided to research Dad's supposed medical condition online, looking up symptoms and treatment costs that might explain their financial strain. "Mom, what exactly is Dad dealing with? Maybe I can help you understand the insurance process. I deal with medical bills at the shop all the time for worker injuries." Patricia's response came too quickly. "Oh, you know how complicated medical stuff is. Nothing you need to worry about. We're handling it fine." Before I could ask more questions, she said she had to go and hung up abruptly. I spent the rest of the evening researching the medical conditions she'd vaguely mentioned, but nothing added up. The procedures she described weren't typically expensive enough to cause serious financial hardship for people who owned their home and had decent insurance. Sarah found me at the kitchen table at midnight, surrounded by printed insurance guides and medical websites. "What are you doing? Something doesn't make sense," I told her. The medical stuff Mom described wouldn't cost enough to prevent them from buying Emma a $20 birthday gift. Sarah sat down beside me, her expression serious. "Isaac, I need to tell you something I've noticed. Your mom has always been kind of cold toward Emma. Not obviously mean, just distant. Like she's doing her duty but not really connecting. I wanted to defend my mother, but Sarah's observation hit something I'd been unconsciously aware of for years. At family gatherings, Patricia would make polite conversation with Emma, but never showed the genuine warmth and enthusiasm I remembered her having with Caroline's children. The next morning, while organizing Emma's birthday thank you cards, I found an email confirmation in my spam folder that made my blood run cold. It was a receipt from a high-end toy store, dated the same day as Emma's birthday, addressed to my parents. They had purchased a $300 interactive robot for someone named Jake. Jake was my nephew, Caroline's son. December 23rd arrived gray and cold, with snow falling steadily outside our living room window. Emma sat beside me at the kitchen table, carefully decorating sugar cookies with rainbow sprinkles while I scrolled through my phone, checking the weather forecast for Christmas Day. That's when Caroline's Instagram story appeared on my feed like a slap across the face. The first photo showed a living room I didn't recognize, beautifully decorated with professional Christmas arrangements and a 12-foot tree covered in golden ornaments. In the center of the image, my parents sat on an elegant burgundy couch, their faces glowing with joy as they watched my 8-year-old nephew Jake and 6-year-old niece Sophie tear open presents. I scrolled to the next photo, my chest growing tighter with each image. There was my father, supposedly too sick and financially strapped to attend Emma's birthday, kneeling on expensive hardwood floors helping Sophie assemble what looked like a deluxe dollhouse. My mother Patricia held Jake as he showed off a remote control helicopter that probably cost $500. Emma noticed my stillness and looked over at my phone. Her small finger pointed at the screen, and her voice carried a confusion that broke my heart. "Daddy, is that Grandma and Grandpa? Why are they at Aunt Caroline's house giving Jake and Sophie presents?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but rage was building in my chest like a pressure cooker. "Yeah, sweetheart, that's them." Emma studied the photos more carefully, her 7-year-old mind processing what she was seeing. "But Daddy, didn't Grandma say they didn't have money for presents? Those look like really expensive toys." Before I could answer, Sarah walked into the kitchen carrying the mail. Among the usual bills and holiday cards was an envelope addressed to the Davidson family in my mother's careful handwriting. Sarah opened it to reveal an expensive Hallmark Christmas card with golden edges and embossed lettering. Inside, written in Patricia's neat script, was a message that made my stomach drop. "To our dear Caroline, David, Jake, and Sophie, wishing you the most wonderful Christmas filled with love and joy. Thank you for being such a blessing to our family. Love always, Grandma and Grandpa." There was no card for Emma. Nothing. Sarah's face went white as she read the card. "Isaac, this is addressed to Caroline's family only. Emma isn't even mentioned." I looked at our daughter, who was now staring at the Christmas card with the same confused expression she'd had while looking at the Instagram photos. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. "Emma, why don't you go play with your new art supplies for a while?" I suggested gently. "Mommy and Daddy need to talk about some grown-up stuff." Once Emma was safely in her playroom, I called Caroline's number directly. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Isaac, Merry Christmas. How are you guys doing?" "Caroline, I saw your Instagram posts. Mom and Dad are at your house for Christmas?" There was a brief pause before she responded. "Oh yeah. They drove up yesterday. We're having such a wonderful time with the kids." Yesterday was December 22nd, I said slowly, calculating the timeline. Emma's birthday was November 15th. They told me they couldn't come because Dad was having medical procedures and money was tight. Another pause, longer this time. "Well, you know how Dad is. He's feeling much better now." "Caroline, how long have Mom and Dad been helping you financially?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are they supporting your family? Because the toys I saw in those photos cost more than most people spend on Christmas for their entire extended family." Caroline's voice became defensive. "Isaac, I don't think that's really your business. Mom and Dad choose how they want to spend their money. It became my business when they lied to me about being broke and hurt my daughter's feelings, I replied, my anger finally surfacing. Emma has been asking me for weeks why Grandma and Grandpa don't love her as much as they love Jake and Sophie. That's not true, Caroline protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Then explain to me why they drove 4 hours to your house on Emma's birthday, instead of coming to her party 20 minutes from their house. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Caroline spoke, her voice quieter. Isaac, Mom said you guys don't really need help because your business is doing so well. She said you've got everything handled. The admission hit me like a physical blow. So they've been talking to you about our financial situation? Sometimes family stuff comes up in conversation, Caroline said evasively. What kind of family stuff, Caroline? Another long pause. Look, Isaac, maybe this isn't the best time to have this conversation. The kids are opening presents and… No, I interrupted. We're having this conversation right now. What have Mom and Dad been saying about Emma and our family? Caroline sighed deeply. They just think that since you're doing well with the business and Sarah comes from a good family, you guys have advantages that David and I don't have. They want to help where help is needed most. The words stung because they revealed the calculation behind my parents' choices. They weren't responding to genuine need. They were picking favorites based on their perception of who deserved their investment. Caroline, how much money have they given you? Isaac, please. How much? They helped us with the down payment on this house, she admitted quietly. And they've been covering the kids' private school tuition for the past 2 years. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. Private school tuition in Caroline's area ran $15,000 per child per year. My parents had been spending $30,000 annually on my sister's children's education, while claiming they couldn't afford a birthday gift for Emma. They also set up college funds for Jake and Sophie, Caroline continued, apparently deciding that honesty was her only option now. $50,000 each, $100,000. My parents had invested $100,000 in my sister's children's future, while Emma had never received so much as a savings bond. Isaac? Are you still there? I'm here, I managed to say. Look, I know this probably sounds unfair, but Mom and Dad are just trying to help where they think help is needed most. You've got a successful business, and Emma will be fine. The casual dismissal of my daughter's emotional needs made my anger boil over. Caroline, Emma is 7 years old. She doesn't understand why her grandparents treat her like she doesn't exist. She thinks she's done something wrong. I'm sure that's not how Mom and Dad see it. How do they see it then? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like they've decided Caroline's kids matter, and Emma doesn't. Caroline's voice became defensive again. That's not fair, Isaac. You know Mom and Dad love Emma. Do I? Because their actions suggest otherwise. The conversation ended shortly after that, with Caroline claiming she needed to get back to Christmas morning with her family. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the Christmas card addressed to everyone except my daughter, while the reality of my family's deliberate cruelty sank in. Sarah found me there an hour later, still holding the card. What did Caroline say? I told her everything, about the house down payment, the private school tuition, the college funds, about the conversation where my parents had apparently decided that Emma's emotional needs were less important than Jake and Sophie's financial advantages. Sarah's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally a protective fury I'd rarely seen from her. Isaac, this isn't just about money. They're emotionally abusing Emma by treating her like she's worth less than her cousins. She was right. And as I sat there processing the magnitude of my parents' favoritism, I realized I had to make a choice. I could continue enabling their behavior by staying silent, or I could protect my daughter by confronting the truth. The choice was easier than I expected. That night, after Emma went to bed clutching her homemade Christmas stocking, I couldn't sleep. Sarah tossed restlessly beside me, equally troubled by the day's revelations. At 2 a.m, I got up and went to my home office, where I kept years of financial records and family correspondence. What I found in the next 4 hours made my stomach sick. I started with my bank statements, tracing back 3 years of automatic monthly transfers I'd been making to my parents. $300 every month, supposedly to help with their fixed income expenses. $3,600 per year. Over $10,000 total that I'd sent believing I was helping my aging parents maintain their dignity. But according to Caroline's admissions, that money had been flowing directly to her family's private school tuition. I pulled up the family text message threads on my phone, searching for patterns I'd been too trusting to notice before. There it was, in black and white. Messages between Patricia and Caroline discussing strategies to keep Emma at a distance while maximizing financial support for Caroline's children. In one particularly devastating exchange from 6 months earlier, Patricia had written, "Isaac's business is doing so well, he doesn't need our help. Better to focus our resources where they can make a real difference for Jake and Sophie's futures." Caroline's response was equally cold. "Exactly. Emma will be fine with Isaac's success. Our kids need the foundation that private school provides." I found another thread where they discussed deliberately scheduling family events when they knew I'd be busy at the shop, ensuring Emma wouldn't be included in gatherings with her cousins. They'd been systematically excluding my daughter while taking my money to fund their preferred grandchildren's advantages. But the worst discovery came when I found the legal documents hidden in an old file folder. My parents had somehow obtained copies of my business financial statements and had attempted to use my auto shop as collateral for a loan without my knowledge or consent. Only a technicality in the bank's verification process had prevented them from potentially bankrupting me to fund Caroline's family. The loan application was for $60,000, and the stated purpose was family education expenses. They had been willing to risk my livelihood to pay for Jake and Sophie's continued private schooling. I called my lawyer's emergency line at 4 in the morning. "Tom, this is Isaac Davidson. I need to know if someone can use my business as collateral, without my signature." Tom Mills had been my attorney since I'd started the shop. His sleepy voice became alert when I explained what I'd found. "Isaac, what you're describing is fraud. If they forged documents, or misrepresented their authority to pledge your assets, they've committed multiple felonies. What should I do? First, change all your banking information immediately. Second, bring me those documents first thing Monday morning. Third, document everything you've discovered. We may be looking at a criminal case." As dawn broke over Columbus, I sat surrounded by evidence of my family's betrayal. They hadn't just shown favoritism toward Caroline's children. They'd been actively stealing from me to fund that favoritism, while emotionally damaging Emma in the process. Sarah found me in the office at 7, still going through papers. Her face was pale with exhaustion from a sleepless night. "Isaac, I found something too," she said quietly, holding Emma's small pink diary. I was putting away her laundry, and this fell out of her backpack. She opened to a page dated 2 weeks after Emma's birthday. In careful 7-year-old handwriting, Emma had written, "I think I must be a bad granddaughter, because Grandma and Grandpa don't visit me like they visit Jake and Sophie. Maybe if I draw them more pictures, they will love me better." The entry was decorated with crayon drawings of stick-figure grandparents holding hands with a little girl labeled Emma. Hearts and flowers surrounded the figures, evidence of my daughter's desperate hope for connection. Sarah turned the page to reveal another entry. "Daddy says Grandpa is sick, but I saw him on Aunt Caroline's phone playing soccer with Jake. I think they don't want to see me because I did something wrong." My hands shook as I read my daughter's innocent attempts to understand adult cruelty. She'd been blaming herself for their rejection, internalizing their favoritism as evidence of her own inadequacy. "Sarah, we have to protect her from this." "I know, but Isaac, there's more. Emma's teacher called yesterday while you were at the shop. Emma told her art teacher that she didn't want to make Father's Day cards last year because her grandparents only love some kids, not all kids. The school counselor has been monitoring her for signs of family stress. The revelation that Emma's pain had become visible to her teachers was the final straw. My family's emotional abuse of my daughter had reached the point where trained professionals were noticing its effects. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve documenting everything. Every financial transfer, every excluded invitation, every cold interaction between Patricia and Emma that I'd rationalized or ignored. I compiled years of evidence showing a systematic pattern of favoritism designed to elevate Caroline's children while diminishing Emma's sense of worth. By Christmas morning, I had a complete dossier of my family's manipulation, financial fraud, emotional abuse, and deliberate cruelty toward a 7-year-old child whose only crime was being born to the wrong parents. I also had a plan. Sarah and I gave Emma a magical Christmas morning, despite the chaos surrounding us. We watched her delight in the gifts we'd chosen with love and attention, and I made a promise to myself that this would be the last Christmas my daughter would spend, wondering why her grandparents didn't love her enough to include her in their lives. While Emma played with her new art supplies, I crafted a social media post that would change everything. It contained the complete truth about my family's favoritism, with financial evidence and timeline documentation. I included photos of Emma's heartbreaking diary entries alongside pictures of Caroline's lavish Christmas posts. I scheduled the post to publish on Christmas morning at 6 a.m., when families across the country would be checking social media to share their holiday joy. I wanted my extended family, my community, and my parents' friends to see exactly what kind of people Patricia and David Davidson really were. The post ended with a simple statement: "My daughter deserves better than grandparents who steal from her father to spoil their favorite grandchildren. This ends today." At 5:59 a.m. on Christmas Day, I hit publish. Within minutes of posting, my phone began buzzing with notifications. Comments, shares, and private messages flooded in faster than I could read them. By 6:30 a.m., while Emma was still opening presents under our Christmas tree, the post had been shared over 200 times. Uncle Robert, my father's brother who lived in Indiana, was among the first to comment publicly. "Isaac, this explains so much. Patricia treated my kids the same way 15 years ago. I wondered if I was imagining it." Cousin Jennifer, Patricia's niece, shared her own story in the comments. "I stopped bringing my family to holiday gatherings because of this exact behavior. Patricia would ignore my children while fawning over Caroline's kids. I thought I was being oversensitive." By 7 a.m., I had received 12 private messages from extended family members sharing similar experiences with Patricia's favoritism. A pattern emerged that went back decades, showing systematic exclusion of certain family branches while elevating others based on Patricia's personal preferences and judgments. My phone rang at 7:15. Patricia's number. "Isaac Davidson, you take that post down immediately." Her voice was shaking with rage. "How dare you humiliate our family like this on Christmas morning?" "Mom, everything in that post is true. I have documentation for every claim I made. You're destroying our reputation over nothing. So what if we spend a little extra on Caroline's kids? They need more help than Emma does." The casual admission that she'd been deliberately showing favoritism was stunning. She wasn't even trying to deny it. "Mom, you told me you were broke and couldn't afford Emma's birthday gift. I found the receipt for Jake's $300 robot that you bought the same day." "That's different. Caroline asked us to help with a special gift for Jake's birthday. What about Emma's birthday? Did anyone ask you to help with a special gift for her?" Silence. "Mom, I've been sending you $300 a month for 3 years. That's over $10,000. Where has that money been going?" "We use that money for expenses." "What expenses?" "Caroline told me you've been paying $30,000 a year for private school tuition. That's my money funding Jake and Sophie's education, while Emma doesn't even get a birthday card." Patricia's voice became defensive and cruel, in a way I'd never heard before. "Emma doesn't need private school. You and Sarah can afford to give her whatever education she needs. Caroline and David are struggling." "Struggling? You bought them a house. We helped with the down payment because they needed support starting their family. What did you do to help Sarah and me when Emma was born?" Another long silence. "Nothing," I answered for her. "You did nothing. Because in your mind, Emma doesn't count as a real grandchild deserving of investment." The call ended with Patricia screaming about ungrateful children and family loyalty before hanging up on me. My phone immediately rang again. "Caroline, Isaac, you have to delete that post. People are calling me asking questions about our family's finances. This is humiliating." "Caroline, I'm not deleting anything. Every word is true, but people don't need to know our private business. You're making Mom and Dad look like terrible people." "They are terrible people, Caroline. They've been emotionally abusing my daughter while stealing money from me to spoil your kids." "They haven't been stealing. They choose how to spend their money." "Including my money?" The $300 a month I've been sending them for 3 years that apparently goes straight to your family? Caroline's voice became small. I didn't know about that. Yes, you did. You knew exactly where the money was coming from. You knew they were taking my contributions to fund your children's advantages while telling Emma they couldn't afford to visit her. Isaac, please. If you don't delete this post, it's going to destroy our family. Good, I said firmly. This family deserves to be destroyed if this is how it operates. By 8 a.m., the local newspaper had contacted me requesting an interview about financial fraud within families. 3 different attorneys had reached out, offering to represent me in potential criminal cases against my parents. My auto shop's social media page was receiving supportive messages from customers expressing outrage at my family's treatment of Emma. Most importantly, extended family members I hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out to Emma directly, inviting her to visit and expressing genuine interest in getting to know their great niece, who had been hidden from them by Patricia's manipulation. Uncle Robert called at 8:30. Isaac, I want you to know that your cousin Mark and I are driving up from Indianapolis today. We want to spend Christmas with Emma and show her what real grandparents look like. Robert, you don't have to do that. Yes, I do. I let Patricia push my family away 20 years ago, and I've regretted it ever since. I'm not letting her do the same thing to Emma. By 9 a.m., 4 cars were parked in my driveway. Uncle Robert and his wife Nancy had arrived with their son Mark and his family. Cousin Jennifer had driven 3 hours from Cleveland with her husband and 2 children. My father's sister Ruth, who lived in Toledo, had come with her daughter and granddaughter. Emma was overwhelmed with joy at suddenly having a house full of relatives who were genuinely excited to meet her, bringing thoughtful gifts and asking about her interests with sincere enthusiasm. For the first time in her life, she experienced what it felt like to be welcomed and celebrated by extended family. While Emma played with her newly discovered cousins, the adults gathered in my living room to share their experiences with Patricia's favoritism and manipulation. The stories were remarkably similar: systematic exclusion, deliberate scheduling conflicts, and emotional coldness towards certain family members while lavishing attention on others. She did this to us when Mark was Emma's age, Uncle Robert explained. Patricia would invite Caroline's family to every holiday gathering, but forget to mention when we were having family events. When I confronted her about it, she claimed there had been communication mix-ups. Cousin Jennifer nodded. She made comments about my husband not being ambitious enough and suggested our kids wouldn't benefit from the same opportunities as Caroline's children. After a few years of feeling unwelcome, we just stopped coming to family events. Aunt Ruth's story was the most revealing. Patricia called me last month asking if I could lend her $5,000 for emergency medical expenses. When I asked what kind of medical emergency, she was vague and evasive. Now I know she was probably trying to get money for Caroline's kids. The pattern was clear. Patricia had been systematically isolating family members who didn't meet her standards while extracting financial resources from those who did. She'd been running a family favoritism scheme for decades, and I'd been too trusting to recognize it. At 8:45 a.m., my father's truck pulled into the driveway. Through the living room window, I could see him getting out of the driver's seat, his face red with anger. Patricia emerged from the passenger side, and behind them, Caroline's minivan arrived with her husband David and their 2 children. They had driven 4 hours through Christmas morning traffic to confront me about the social media post that was destroying their carefully constructed narrative about family loyalty and financial need. Uncle Robert stood up and looked out the window. Isaac, do you want us to stay for this? I looked at Emma, who was happily showing her new cousin how to use her art supplies, oblivious to the storm about to break outside our front door. Yes, I said firmly. I want Emma to see what it looks like when family members stand up for each other. My father's fist was already pounding on the front door. The pounding on my front door was so aggressive that Emma looked up from her coloring books, startled. Uncle Robert immediately moved toward the window while Cousin Jennifer instinctively stepped closer to Emma, creating a protective barrier around my daughter. Isaac Davidson, you open this door right now. My father's voice carried across the yard, loud enough that neighbors were beginning to peer out their windows. I opened the door to find my father's face purple with rage. my mother standing behind him with tears streaming down her cheeks, and Caroline's family huddled together looking embarrassed by the scene they'd been dragged into. "Dad, keep your voice down. Emma is inside with family." "Family?" he spat. "You mean the people you invited here to humiliate us? You destroyed Christmas for everyone with your lies and manipulation." "What lies?" I asked calmly. "Everything in my post was documented fact. You made us look like criminals." Uncle Robert appeared beside me in the doorway. "Hello, David." "Patricia." The sight of his brother seemed to deflate my father slightly. He clearly hadn't expected to face other family members who might have their own stories to share. "Robert," Dad said stiffly, "I didn't know you were here. Isaac invited us for Christmas after we saw his post. Funny how we never received invitations to family gatherings when Patricia was organizing them." Patricia's tear-streaked face became defensive. "Robert, you know you were always welcome. Were we? Because I have 3 years of missed birthday invitations and holiday announcements that somehow never made it to our mailbox." Caroline stepped forward, looking desperate. "Uncle Robert, this is just a misunderstanding. We can work this out as a family without involving the whole community." "Caroline," Cousin Jennifer appeared in the doorway. "Is it true that Grandma and Grandpa have been paying for your kids' private school tuition?" Caroline's face went white. She clearly hadn't expected to face a room full of family members who now knew the details of her financial arrangements with our parents. "That's not really anyone's business," Caroline replied weakly. "It became everyone's business when they told Isaac they were too broke to buy Emma a birthday gift." Aunt Ruth joined the conversation from behind us. "Hello, Patricia. Still playing favorites after all these years?" My mother's face crumpled. She was facing 4 adult family members who had personal experience with her favoritism, and her usual tactics of denial and manipulation weren't working. "Can we please come inside and discuss this privately?" Patricia asked, her voice small. "No," I said firmly. "Emma doesn't need to witness you trying to justify why she's worth less than her cousins." "That's not what we think," Dad exploded. "We love Emma." "Prove it," Uncle Robert challenged. "When was the last time you visited her? When was the last time you sent her a card or called to ask about her school activities?" My father's mouth opened and closed, but no answer came. Emma appeared beside me, having left her coloring to see what the commotion was about. She looked up at my parents with the same confused expression she'd had when looking at Caroline's Christmas photos. "Hi, Grandma and Grandpa," she said politely. "Did you come to see my Christmas presents?" The innocent question hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia knelt down to Emma's eye level, clearly struggling to maintain her composure. "Hi, sweetheart. We just wanted to talk to your daddy about some grown-up things." Emma nodded seriously. "Are you sad because Daddy posted those pictures on his phone? Cousin Mark said people were being mean to you on the computer." Out of the mouths of babes. My 7-year-old daughter was showing more emotional intelligence than the adults who had been excluding her from their lives. "Emma, we're not mad at you," Patricia said carefully. "We love you very much." "Then why don't you visit me like you visit Jake and Sophie?" Emma asked with devastating directness. "They get to go to special dinners and get presents all the time. Do I live too far away?" The question hit Patricia like a physical blow. She looked up at me with panic in her eyes, realizing that her carefully constructed excuses were falling apart under a child's simple logic. "Emma," Caroline interjected, "Grandma and Grandpa live closer to our house, so it's easier for them to visit us. But Daddy said you live 4 hours away, and we only live 20 minutes away," Emma replied, her math skills making Caroline's excuse meaningless. Caroline's face flushed red as she realized she'd been caught in an obvious lie in front of multiple witnesses. My father tried a different approach. "Emma, sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't seem fair to kids, but there are reasons that are hard to explain." "Like what reasons?" Emma asked, her curiosity genuine. The adults fell silent. There was no explanation for their behavior that wouldn't sound cruel when spoken to a 7-year-old. Uncle Robert knelt down beside Emma. "Sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and hurt people's feelings without meaning to. Your daddy is trying to make sure that doesn't happen anymore." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Like when I accidentally broke Mom's flower pot and had to say sorry and help plant new flowers?" "Exactly like that," Robert smiled. "Sometimes when people hurt someone's feelings, they need to say sorry and find ways to fix it. Emma looked expectantly at my parents. Are you going to say sorry for missing my birthday? Patricia's tears were flowing freely now. She looked at her granddaughter's trusting face and seemed to realize, perhaps for the first time, the impact of her choices on an innocent child. Emma, Grandma is very sorry we missed your birthday, she said quietly. And that you never visit me? Yes, and that we never visit you. And that you don't call me or send me cards like you do for Jake and Sophie? Each question was like a knife twist, exposing the depth of my parents' favoritism in terms a child could understand. Yes, Emma. Grandma is sorry for all of those things. Emma considered this for a moment. Daddy says when we're really sorry we have to change our behavior, not just say words. Are you going to change? The question hit the heart of the entire situation. Words were meaningless without corresponding actions, and my parents had a decades-long pattern of favoring Caroline's children while neglecting Emma. My father looked uncomfortable with the attention focused on him. Emma, grown-up relationships are complicated. We'll try to do better. That's not a real answer, Emma said with the brutal honesty that only children possess. Are you going to visit me and call me and send me cards like you do for my cousins? The silence stretched uncomfortably as my parents realized they were being held accountable by a 7-year-old who simply wanted equal treatment. Caroline's husband David finally spoke up. Maybe we should all take a step back and figure out how to move forward constructively. David's right, Caroline agreed quickly, clearly desperate to end the confrontation. This has gotten out of hand. Has it? Aunt Ruth challenged. Because from where I stand, this conversation is long overdue. Emma deserves to know where she stands with her grandparents. Emma looked around at all the adults staring at her and seemed to realize she was at the center of something important. I just want Grandma and Grandpa to love me like they love Jake and Sophie. I don't understand why that's hard. The simple statement contained more wisdom than any of the adults had managed to express. A child's need for equal treatment wasn't complicated or unreasonable. It was basic human dignity. My phone buzzed with a notification. The social media post had now been shared over 800 times, and the local news station was requesting an interview about family favoritism and emotional abuse. Isaac, Patricia said desperately, please delete that post. We can work this out privately. Mom, we've had 7 years to work this out privately. You chose not to. But this public humiliation isn't solving anything. Actually, it is, Uncle Robert interjected. It's exposing patterns of behavior that have hurt multiple family members for decades. Sometimes public accountability is the only thing that creates real change. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Daddy, can I ask Grandma and Grandpa something? I nodded, curious what insight my daughter would offer. Emma looked directly at my parents. Do you think I'm a bad granddaughter? The question hit like a bombshell. Patricia gasped, and my father's angry expression crumbled. Emma, no, Patricia cried. You're not a bad granddaughter. Then why do you act like you don't want to see me? Emma asked with heartbreaking logic. It was the question that cut through all the adult rationalizations and excuses. My parents were facing the consequences of their choices through the eyes of the child they'd been hurting. And for the first time in years, they had no answer that didn't reveal the ugliness of their favoritism. The silence following Emma's question was deafening. My parents stood frozen, realizing they'd been cornered by a 7-year-old's simple logic. Around us, neighbors had gathered on their porches, drawn by the commotion and the growing number of cars in my driveway. My father tried to regain control of the situation. This conversation needs to happen inside, away from the neighborhood. No, I said firmly. Emma doesn't need to be trapped in a room while you try to gaslight her about your behavior. We're not gaslighting anyone, Patricia protested. We're trying to have a family discussion, like the family discussions you had when you decided to exclude Emma from family events, Cousin Jennifer challenged, or when you chose to fund Caroline's kids' college educations while ignoring Emma's existence. Caroline's face went white. How do you know about the college funds? Because Isaac shared the documentation, Aunt Ruth replied. $100,000 for Jake and Sophie, 0 for Emma. That's not favoritism. That's deliberate cruelty. Emma looked up at me with wide eyes. Daddy, what's a college fund? Before I could answer, Uncle Robert knelt down beside her. It's money that grandparents sometimes save to help their grandchildren go to school when they grow up. Emma processed this information and turned to my parents. Do I have a college fund? Patricia looked like she wanted to disappear. Emma, that's something we can talk about later. That means no, Emma said with devastating accuracy. You saved money for Jake and Sophie's school, but not for mine. The blunt statement hung in the air, forcing everyone to confront the mathematical reality of my parents' favoritism. They had invested $100,000 in Caroline's children's futures, while actively refusing to acknowledge Emma's existence in their financial planning. My father's face turned red again. Emma, you don't understand how these things work. Your daddy's business is successful, so you don't need help the way Jake and Sophie do. But Daddy sends you money every month to help you, Emma replied, her innocent observation dropping like a bomb. I heard him talking to Mommy about it. So you do have money for college funds. Caroline's mouth fell open. Isaac's been sending you money? $300 a month for 3 years, I confirmed. Money that apparently went straight to your family's expenses while my parents claimed they were too broke to buy Emma birthday gifts. The financial revelation was the final piece that completed the picture of my parents' manipulation. They had been taking money from one son to spoil the other son's children while neglecting their third grandchild entirely. David, Caroline's husband, looked genuinely shocked. Caroline, did you know they were taking money from Isaac? Caroline's inability to answer was answer enough. Emma tugged on Patricia's coat. Grandma, why did you take Daddy's money to buy presents for Jake and Sophie instead of saving some for me? The question, asked with a child's innocent directness, was more devastating than any adult accusation could have been. Patricia knelt down and tried to take Emma's hands, but Emma stepped back toward me. Sweetheart, grown-up money decisions are very complicated. No, they're not, Emma replied with startling clarity. You chose to spend money on Jake and Sophie, and not on me. That's not complicated, that's just mean. Uncle Robert's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it before looking up with a grim expression. Isaac. The local news van just pulled up at the end of the street. My social media post had gained enough attention to attract media coverage. Within minutes, a reporter would be knocking on our door asking questions about family favoritism and financial manipulation. My father's panic was immediate. Isaac, you have to send them away. This is private family business. Nothing about this has been private, Dad. You've been publicly excluding Emma from family events for years. You've been publicly celebrating Caroline's kids while ignoring Emma. The only difference is now people know the truth, instead of just seeing the surface. Caroline grabbed my arm. Isaac, please. The reporter is going to ask about our finances, about the private school tuition, about everything. This will ruin our reputation in our community. Your reputation should be ruined, I said coldly. You've been complicit in emotionally abusing a 7-year-old child. Emma looked up at me. Daddy, what's a reporter? Someone who asks questions and tells people's stories, I explained gently. Emma considered this. Will they ask me questions? They might, sweetheart. Do you want to talk to them? Emma nodded seriously. I want to tell them that I just wanted Grandma and Grandpa to love me like they love my cousins. The simple statement broke something inside Patricia. She started crying openly, finally seeming to understand the impact of her actions on my daughter. Emma, I do love you, she sobbed. Then why don't you show me? Emma asked with heartbreaking logic. Jake and Sophie get visits and presents and special dinners and college money. What do I get? Patricia had no answer, because the truth was that Emma got nothing. 7 years of systematic neglect couldn't be explained away with words about love when the actions told a completely different story. The news van pulled into my driveway, and a reporter with a camera operator stepped out. My father immediately tried to position himself between the camera and Emma. You people need to leave. This is a private family matter. The reporter, a professional woman in her 30s, approached calmly. Good morning. I'm Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. We received multiple calls about a social media post documenting family financial fraud and child emotional abuse. Is this the Davidson residence? Yes, I answered before my father could speak. I'm Isaac Davidson, and I posted the documentation about my family's treatment of my daughter. Mr. Davidson, would you be willing to speak on camera about your experiences? Before I could answer, Emma stepped forward. Are you the question lady? Jennifer Walsh smiled and knelt down to Emma's level. I am. I ask questions to help people understand what's happening. What's your name? Emma. I'm 7 years old, and my grandparents don't visit me because they like my cousins better. The reporter's expression shifted to one of professional concern. Emma, can you tell me more about that? Emma looked up at me for permission, and I nodded. She turned back to the reporter with the confidence of a child who had nothing to hide. My grandparents go to all of Jake and Sophie's birthdays and give them expensive presents and take them to special dinners and saved money for their college. But they told my daddy they were too poor to come to my birthday party. Then we saw pictures of them giving Jake and Sophie lots of presents on the same day as my birthday. The reporter's camera operator was recording Emma's innocent but devastating testimony. My parents watched in horror as their granddaughter publicly exposed their favoritism with the kind of clarity that only children possess. Emma, how does that make you feel? Jennifer asked gently. Sad, Emma replied simply, and confused. I asked my daddy if I was a bad granddaughter, but he said I'm perfect, just the way I am. I think my grandparents just don't like me very much. Patricia made a strangled sound and reached toward Emma, but Emma stepped closer to me instead of accepting her grandmother's comfort. The reporter turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, do you have any response to your granddaughter's statements? My father's face was purple with rage and embarrassment. We're not answering questions from reporters about our family's private business. But sir, financial fraud isn't private business. We have documentation showing that you've been taking money from one son while spending large amounts on another son's children. How do you respond to allegations of favoritism and emotional abuse? There's no abuse, Patricia cried. We love all our grandchildren. Emma looked up at her with sad eyes. If you love me, why don't you act like it? The question, captured on camera and broadcast to thousands of homes that evening, would become the defining moment of the entire situation. A 7-year-old child asking her grandmother why love required proof through actions, not just words. It was a question my parents couldn't answer without admitting their cruelty, and their silence on camera spoke louder than any confession could have. 6 months later, I sat on my back porch on a warm June evening, watching Emma play in the yard with her cousins Mark and Jennifer's kids. Uncle Robert was teaching them how to plant tomatoes in our garden, while Sarah and Aunt Nancy discussed plans for Emma's 8th birthday party. The transformation in our family had been remarkable and complete. Within a week of the news story airing, my parents had agreed to financial restitution that included establishing a college fund for Emma, equal to what they'd provided for Caroline's children. They also agreed to repay every dollar I'd sent them over 3 years, with interest. The civil lawsuit I'd filed had been settled out of court when they realized the alternative was potential criminal charges for financial fraud. More importantly, they'd agreed to attend family counseling sessions, focused on understanding the impact of favoritism on grandchildren. The therapist, Dr. Martinez, had been blunt about the psychological damage they'd caused Emma through their systematic exclusion. Favoritism isn't just unfair, she'd explained during our joint session. It's a form of emotional abuse that can damage a child's sense of self-worth for decades. Emma spent the first 7 years of her life believing she was fundamentally less valuable than her cousins. Patricia had cried during that session, finally understanding that her choices had been motivated by her own prejudices about social class and financial success, rather than any genuine need to help where help was needed most. The counseling had been painful but necessary. My parents had been forced to confront their bias against Sarah's family background and their resentment about my success without a college degree. They'd been taking out their own insecurities on an innocent child. Caroline's family had faced their own reckoning. When their community learned about the private school tuition arrangement and the financial manipulation involved, Caroline and David had been forced to withdraw Jake and Sophie from private school and find employment that didn't depend on my parents' support. Caroline had eventually apologized to Emma directly, acknowledging her role in encouraging the favoritism that had hurt her niece. But the most significant change had been the emergence of Emma's relationship with extended family members, who had been excluded from family events for years. Uncle Robert and Aunt Nancy had become the loving grandparent figures Emma had always deserved, visiting monthly and including her in family traditions that Patricia had never bothered to establish. Cousin Jennifer's children, who were close to Emma's age, had become the cousins Emma could actually spend time with and build relationships with. Family gatherings were now inclusive events, where all children were welcomed and celebrated equally. Emma herself had thrived with therapy and the security of knowing she was valued by family members who chose to demonstrate their love through consistent actions. Her school performance improved dramatically when she no longer carried the emotional burden of wondering why her grandparents didn't want her in their lives. "Daddy," Emma called from the garden, "Uncle Robert says I can help him plant the corn next week." I smiled, watching my daughter experience the joy of being genuinely wanted and included by family members who saw her value. My relationship with my parents had slowly begun to rebuild, but it was based on new terms that prioritized Emma's emotional safety. They were allowed supervised visits that gradually increased as they demonstrated consistent, respectful treatment of Emma. The monthly visits were structured around activities Emma enjoyed, and Patricia was learning to engage with her granddaughter as an individual rather than comparing her to Caroline's children. The process wasn't always easy. Patricia struggled to overcome years of ingrained favoritism, and there were setbacks when she would make comments that revealed her continuing bias. But Dr. Martinez had equipped our family with tools to address these moments directly, rather than allowing them to fester. My auto shop had actually benefited from the publicity surrounding our family's story. Customers appreciated my willingness to stand up for my daughter, and many shared their own experiences with family favoritism and emotional abuse. The community support had been overwhelming and affirming. Most importantly, Emma had learned that she deserved to be treated with dignity and respect by everyone in her life, including family members. She developed strong boundaries and the confidence to advocate for herself when those boundaries were crossed. "Isaac, Sarah joined me on the porch," Emma's teacher called today. She wanted to know if Emma could share her story at a conference about children's emotional resilience. Apparently, other kids in her class have been inspired by how she stood up for herself. I looked at my daughter, who was now 8 years old and radiated confidence in a way that had been missing during those early years when she'd internalized my parents' rejection. "What do you think?" I asked Sarah. "I think Emma has something important to teach other kids about knowing their worth," she replied. That evening, after extended family had gone home and Emma was safely asleep, I reflected on the journey we'd traveled together. Standing up to my parents' favoritism had been terrifying because it meant risking relationships that I'd valued, even though they were built on dysfunction. But protecting Emma's emotional well-being had required courage I didn't know I possessed. The alternative was watching my daughter grow up believing she was fundamentally less valuable than her cousins, internalizing my parents' cruelty as evidence of her own inadequacy. The most profound lesson had been understanding that love requires action, not just words. My parents had claimed to love Emma while systematically excluding her from their lives and financial planning. Their words were meaningless without corresponding behaviors that demonstrated care and investment in her well-being. True family relationships are built on mutual respect, consistent care, and equal treatment. Blood relationships that involve favoritism, manipulation, or emotional abuse aren't worth preserving if they damage innocent children in the process. Emma deserved grandparents who celebrated her existence, invested in her future, and made her feel valued as an individual. When my parents proved incapable of providing that love, extended family members stepped forward to fill that role with genuine warmth and commitment. Standing up to family dysfunction is never easy, but protecting children from emotional abuse is always worth the temporary discomfort of challenging adults who should know better. Emma's confidence and joy now are proof that children thrive when they're surrounded by adults who demonstrate their value through consistent, loving actions. The most satisfying aspect of our family's transformation has been watching Emma develop into a confident child who knows she deserves equal treatment and isn't afraid to advocate for herself. She'll never again wonder whether she's a bad granddaughter because she understands that love isn't conditional on being the favorite. Sometimes protecting the people we love most requires us to confront the people who claim to love them, but demonstrate otherwise through their actions. Emma's story shows that children are resilient when they're supported by adults who prioritize their emotional safety over maintaining dysfunctional family dynamics. As I've shared our story with other families facing similar challenges, I've learned that favoritism among grandchildren is more common than people realize. Many parents struggle with how to address grandparents who show obvious preferences among their grandchildren, often staying silent to preserve family harmony while their children internalize feelings of inadequacy. Our experience proves that confronting favoritism directly, even when it causes temporary family conflict, ultimately creates healthier relationships built on mutual respect rather than silent resentment. Emma now has authentic connections with family members who chose to demonstrate their love through consistent actions rather than empty words. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who treated your children unfairly? How did you balance maintaining family relationships with protecting your child's emotional well-being? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Thank you for listening to Emma's story and supporting families who choose to prioritize their children's dignity over dysfunctional family traditions. Please like this video if it resonated with your own experiences. Subscribe for more stories about family resilience, and share this with anyone who might need encouragement to advocate for their children's emotional safety. Remember that every child deserves to feel valued and loved by the adults in their lives, and sometimes fighting for that love means refusing to accept anything less than genuine care and respect.